Hey, what's that new urban talk show that everyone's talking about? You know, the show where they focus on issues that matter to the lives of everyday people? Well, that show is called Tabernacle Talks, coming to you live with an urban vibe. Tune in every Tuesday evening at 6:30 p.m. to get your mind blown. This show is off the charts, and you don't want to be the one who's missing out. Check us out. Be wise. You'll be surprised. In the classic poem Mother to Son, Langston Hughes writes about a conversation between a mother and her son, describing the path her life had taken and the challenges she faced to move forward. At that time, the obstacle was racism. Today, we are looking at another woman's heroic climb. Her obstacles were the people in her life whom she thought loved her, only to find disappointment, abandonment, and fear. Since we started our broadcast, 48 people have been victimized by rape, physical violence, or stalking by their intimate partner. That's a rate of 24 people per minute. There are 4 types of intimate partner violence: stalking, sexual violence, physical violence, and psychological aggression. As children, when we sang "Sticks and Stones would break our bones, but words would never hurt us," these are the lies perpetuated by abusers. Many of us know that love is not supposed to hurt. However, in reality, many of us know it can. Approximately 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will face the reality of violence from an intimate partner. 1 in 10 women will be stalked by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Yes, 1 in 10. 50% of women have experienced some form of psychological aggression by an intimate partner. Psychological aggression aims to dominate, intimidate, and assign blame. Partner violence crosses all ethnicities, cultures, and communities. It is truly an equal opportunity stain on human interaction, with over 35% of women globally being victimized. We hope that after hearing Crystal's story, that anyone experiencing violence will come to realize there is another way to live. You can choose happiness and survive because it's okay to be selfish and pursue a life worth living. Hopefully someone today will choose another way. Hello, I'm Dr. Michelle Pierce Mobley, and today's program is about toxic relationships. And let me start and begin by saying that toxic relationships can happen to anyone. There's no specific type and there's no specific culture that we will see toxic relationships. So today I want to welcome to our program Crystal Barclay, and I'm excited that Crystal's here. Welcome, Crystal.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I've got so many questions, so hopefully you'll bear with us today, and if I get too detailed or too long, just kind of stop me. But I think many women grow up with that fairy tale life that, you're going to get married, have kids, walk off into the sunset, and it's going to be a straight path. But for some women, that path is not that straight. It can be crooked. And for you, you have some roads that didn't quite go a straight way, and you were very open about talking about that story. Why did you feel that you needed to share your story with the world?
Well, I wasn't always open to sharing my story with anyone. Very few friends knew the things that I had been enduring, the things that I have gone through. But it wasn't until a couple of months ago when an old friend of mine, she had reached out to me, and she said to me that a friend of hers, she does books, typically with several women, allowing them to share whatever stories it is that they may have that relates to the specific topic. And so this particular one was the book that I co-authored, which is She is the Ish, Survivor to Conqueror. And when she had messaged me and told me, I really think that this is something that you should do, I was like, no. And I was like, okay. And she's like, no, Crystal, I really think that you need to share your story. I really feel like women need to hear a little bit more about your testimony. and the things that you have gone through, with her not knowing the extent of what I had gone through in my personal marriage. So it wasn't always that I was willing and open to talk about it, but the more that I did share bits and pieces of what it was that I was going through, I began to understand, and I had people coming to me like, you are strong. You are so powerful. You've encouraged me. You inspire me. And I'm like, me? And so the more I guess, got comfortable in my role, I began to talk a little bit more about it. So going through what I went through, it was just me seeking God and God giving me that ability to be able to not be afraid anymore. And the scripture that I particularly like to kind of remind myself of from time to time is Jeremiah 29:11. For I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And I feel like before I met God and really began to have that intimate relationship with Him, I was all of those things, the opposite. I was fearful. I was powerless. I was hopeless, and I didn't have any of that my entire life. So when God gave me that scripture, it was almost like a switch had gone off. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so a little bit at a time, like I began to move and I began to just kind of remove what I call the muzzle of life off of my mouth,
Yes.
And it's just like, stitch by stitch. But eventually I got there, and now here we are.
Well, I know I've had the opportunity and the pleasure to read the book, and one thing that I found particularly fascinating about your story is that you weren't always open. But at one point in your life, you decided, I need to talk about this, because you were putting up that wall that I think a lot of women put up when things are not going okay in their relationships. Why did you feel at some point that it wasn't okay to hide it anymore?
Things began to really take a turn. And, you have the Trinity. You got the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I think for me, it was me, my oldest, and my baby boy. And the more that I began to seek God and began to pray and try to cover us, the more power I felt like I had to just say, you know what, this is what it is. Because it was getting to a point where I could no longer conceal what it was that I had been trying to hide. Just watching my spouse unravel and just turn into a person that I no longer recognized. And he was never physically abusive to me, but the mental, the emotional, the verbal. And to see him act out in certain manners, like, for example, there was a time, my cousin, she's military, and she had come home from Hawaii. She had done her time there and had come back to the States. And so she was visiting me. And this particular night, she had parked in the driveway. And so because she was parked in the driveway, he was upset that she was there. So she got ready to leave, and I went upstairs, and I'm like, hey, can I get your keys? And he was like, I'll move the car when I'm ready to move the car. In a sense, like, she inconvenienced me, so I'm going to inconvenience her. So I'm like, okay, but being that person, I don't like confrontation. So I didn't argue. I found his keys, and I just moved the truck myself. So as I'm coming back upstairs to the bedroom to put the keys back on the dresser, when I'm walking out, I heard like a thud. And so I'm like, what was that? Only to realize later when I came back upstairs that he had punched a hole in our bedroom wall. And wow. So although it wasn't me that he hit, to know that he did that and that he was capable of just doing that, like, it just kind of took hit at my heart, And I'm like, wow. And so at that point was when I began to just kind of like, no, like I can't do this no more. Something has got to give. And so my cousin, this cousin in particular, she's one that I have shared a lot with. So, I would call her and I'm like, hey, this is what happened today. Or guess what he did, or guess what he said. And that type of thing. And it was like when I saw those behaviors, for me, it was like, okay, now I got to go into survival mode.
You also talked about your relationship with your father. I'm a daddy's girl, so I understand how that first relationship with your father can shape a lot of your later relationships with men in terms of your self-esteem, whether you have depression. There's tons of research about how women deal with stress depending on the relationship with your father. And interestingly enough, the father has a greater influence on your behaviors later in life than your mom. Can you speak to the relationship with your father? Because you did touch on that in your book.
Yeah, my dad, so I'm his only child, 36 years old. And since I can remember, my dad and I never had the best relationship. And I could never understand why, because I was a good little girl. I, mind my manners. I obeyed my parents. I wasn't a bad child. I wasn't out of control or anything like that. But I honestly, my dad was present, but he wasn't. And so for me, it was the women in my life that really had the greatest influence on me. And I don't know, like I just picked up at a young age, seeing my dad mistreat his mother, which was my grandmother. I knew it wasn't right. But then I also was like, I'll never date a man that's like him.
Well, your story touches on issues of depression, anxiety, hopelessness, and you got to a point in your life where you felt hopeless, that you felt like you were going to go over the edge, but you didn't. What stopped you?
My sons. The day that I finally had that break, I had gone into my bedroom. I was home alone, and it was just like life was just replaying itself from the beginning up until that point, where even as a child growing up in the household that I lived in, I didn't understand why I was always the one that was mistreated. I didn't understand why I wasn't allowed to do certain things when I knew that I'm not gonna go out here and be, running the street, or as they used to say back in the day, fast. I just wanted to hang out with my friends. But my grandmother was so strict on me. And it didn't matter what I did. Like if I took a nap after school, because she would wake me up at 4:45 a.m. And so naturally, when I get out of school, I'm tired. So I'll take a nap and she'll come find me and she's like, you must be pregnant. Why are you sleeping so much? And it was tough. So just coming through life and dealing with the things that I dealt with at home growing up as a kid, and then moving into this marriage, it's like I'm trying to be the best person that I know how to be. I was a faithful wife. I was honest. I made sure that everything was taken care of. The man almost never had to do a thing. The only thing he had to do was feed himself. I prepared the meals, I made the plates, warmed the place up when he would come home from work, the clothes were clean, kids were taken care of, and I just got to that point where I was tired of him, in a sense, shaming me for not being who he wanted me to be. And it's like, what am I doing wrong?
Being more perfect. More perfect than perfect.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't get it. And so at this point, I'm like, I'm just tired. I'm tired. And then my brother had passed away in 2016, which left me to take care of my mom at some point. My grandmother was still alive, but I knew that whenever that time would come, that it would be just me. So it was just like a lot of things just kind of playing over in my head, and I'm just like, I can't do this. I can't make my grandmother happy. She feels however it is that she feels about me, about my life, and what I could do or could not be doing. And then there's my husband, who I just can't seem to please. So why don't I just do everybody a favor and just end it all? But it was that moment when I sat there and I was on my side of the bed at the floor, and I closed my eyes and took the gun that he had in the drawer, and I put it to my head, and I saw both of my boys' faces. And it was at that moment that I told myself, I'm stronger than this. Yes. This isn't fair. This isn't fair to them. So what do I do now? And at that point, I literally let go. And I said, God, have your way. I really did. And I've always believed. I've always been a believer, but I've just never been that one where, it's like, okay, I'm going to let God handle it. But I'm still holding on to a little piece of it just in case God don't do with it what I want him to do with it. So I did. I just let it go. And I'm like, God, have it. It's yours.
Let go.
Yeah.
And let God.
Yeah.
You talked about earlier the incident where your spouse punched the wall. Mm-hmm. And I think for many of the people in our audience, we've all had that crazy boyfriend or someone that we would say made us feel uncomfortable. But when did you begin to believe that it was a lot more than that? Because there's a stigma in this society about getting help or getting treatment. At what point did you think this isn't just an angry moment with him?
It had actually been many times before that I kind of felt in the back of my mind like something's not right. But that was kind of like the icing on the cake when he punched the hole in our bedroom wall. And I'm like, whoa. But it was like from that moment forward, it was just like he slowly spiraled downward. And it got to the point where it was like, okay, who are you and what have you done with my husband? I'm like, I'm not doing this. So when he had done that night, I had left and went to go stay with my aunt, me and the boys. And, I told him, like, clearly you need some space. And I'm going to give you a couple days and I'll be back. And so, I did leave and stayed gone like 2 or 3 days. And then eventually, we talked about it. And but it was more of like the manipulation. I won't even say that we had a discussion.
Yeah.
It was more of the manipulation. And so for me, I'm a people pleaser. So it was like, okay, if this is what you're saying you're going to do, then fine. Like, I'll be, okay, I'll work with you. And it was then where I did look at it from a different lens, though. Like, okay, you're saying this, but I got to keep my eyes peeled, because you ain't about to catch me off guard type of thing. So
you talk about strength, but you're actually a lot stronger than you even give yourself credit, because in the book, you actually are on your own at age 16. You were living with your grandmother, I believe, at the time, and you were actually paying rent at 16. And I had to flash back to when I was 16. Yeah. I wasn't paying rent to my parents. Right. And so can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think that shows a tremendous amount of character and confidence and just reserve to be able to do that at age 16. Speak about that some.
So I was raised by my grandmother. My mom was there in the household with us. My mom, she's hearing impaired. She's deaf. And so my grandmother had custody of me and my brother and my cousins. And 16, I decided, like, I want to be like my friends. I had friends. I was in choir. I went to Stivers, so I got to go to the choir concerts, but I wanted to do, like, the extracurricular stuff. I had friends that were in show choir. friends that got to cheer and run track and do those types of things. And like, I wanted to do that. And so cheering was something that I was like, I'm going to try out for this. And so I went, I tried out, I made the cheerleading squad. And so I get home and I'm like, Granny, I made it. And so she was like, oh, okay. So I'm like, well, I need like a uniform and some shoes. She's like, well, you're going to have to get a job. And I'm like, wow. But I'm 16. You know, like, how am I going to be able to cheer if I got to go to work? So needless to say, I wasn't able to cheer because I was working. And so my grandmother would always ask me, well, she kind of kept track of my pay dates from when I got my first check. So she knew 2 weeks from then that I'll be getting paid. So what she would do would be like, so how much was your check this week? And so I had to kind of lie at some point because it's like, she's taking all my money, you know. So I got to the point where I was telling stories about how much money I may or may not have received from working so that I could have money in my pocket to be able to go to school and eat at the cart outside the cafeteria, to have like the good snacks, the cookies and the chicken poppers with the cheese, or, you know, being able to buy a bottled drink if I wanted to. And so my dad asked her one day, he said, well, why are you taking her money? And so she told my dad, I'm making her pay rent. I'm trying to teach her how to be responsible. And so at that time, I was furious. You know, I was very angry with my grandma for doing that. But today, looking back, you know, it's a lesson that I do appreciate. And even after I moved out, like, me and my grandmother were very close. But it was just difficult to know that she's taking my money that I'm working for, which is $6.10 an hour at KFC. That was my first job. And to know that she was doing that, and there were other adults in the household that were able to give her money. And not only did she take the money from me, but she received the welfare checks for me and my brother and my cousins and my mom, and her own Social Security check, and she went to work every day.
Wow.
Yeah, so that, I was a little bitter. But now that I've grown up, you know, I, in a sense, like, I kind of understand that was whatever her culture was growing up, because she didn't have. So maybe her taking from whatever pocket she could, you know, made her feel like, this is what I have to do. I don't know.
There are two additional heroes in this story, and it's your sons. You write about caring for them. You write about being protectors of them. And you talk about your own suicidal ideation and that you overcame that. But there's one additional suicide that you write about in the book. Do you mind sharing that with everyone?
So, losing their dad was very hard. And it was hard because we were going through a very, very difficult time in our marriage. And I hadn't spoken to him in 2 months prior to him taking his life. So for me, it's still the why. Like, I don't know why he would do what he's done to our two precious baby boys. So a part of me being angry, a part of me being confused, a part of me being frustrated. But through the frustration and through the confusion, through the pain and the tears, I had to continue to fight for them. But I got to a point just recently, it was just a couple of months ago, I was driving home from work, and I had just spoke to my son's teacher. And this is when COVID first hit, and they were home working from school, working at home. doing their schoolwork, and the teachers had called me and were saying that Jason basically, it's just like he's giving up. Like he is not putting forth any effort. And so at this point, I'm like, I really don't know what else to do. Like I'm trying to do the best that I can as a mom. I'm trying to play the role that their dad has now forfeited in a sense. And it's like, I can't do it. I don't know. So I'm driving on the highway. I was coming down 75 and I hit the gas. And like in my mind, I'm getting ready to go off the side of the road. Because at this point, like, I don't care. He was able to give up his family, like he's the hero to them. And I'm the bad guy when he was the one that gave up on us. And so like it's frustrating because I have them, and it's as much as I hurt for them, as much as I'm just as confused as they are, we're in this thing together. And that's what I tell Jason all the time. Like, I know that it's hard and I know that you miss your dad, but it's those two little boys that keep me from, just like giving up completely, and knowing that I've come as far as I have, and I'm where I am, and I still am in my right mind. You know what I mean?
Yes. And yours is a story of triumph, and I think that's why it's important for people to focus on. It's not where you start, it's where you end up. And that's why I'm so excited about your book and the book that you authored with 12 other very powerful women. And she is the ish. You are the ish. You are, when we talk about girl power, that's you. Because some significant things happened to you in your life, but you were able to confront that. And I would say for the stories that are in here, some of them are just jaw-dropping. They are heart-wrenching. And you and these other women, how did you meet these other women? You just came together with these stories, and this is powerful. It's a powerful... Now, why are there no men in this book? I guess I want to challenge the author. Why are there no men's stories in here?
Well, the men do co-author the book, too. That's who we talking about. So we didn't leave them out completely. But it's just more or less, the women empowerment, because we don't do that enough in our society. So it's women giving other women the chance to be able to tell their truth without being judged. Because people see me, they're like, oh, she got money. Oh, you must live in Centerville. No, I live on the west side of Dayton. And actually, my bank account is in the negative. Can I borrow a couple dollars? You know what I mean? But it's like, I don't like to be, looked at as the victim. And I know what my goals are, and I know what my aspirations are. And I can't allow myself to walk around and look like what I've been through. And so in learning, and I'm learning every single day, how to continue to push through, how to continue to press through, how to continue to survive and conquer every challenge. I have to put on my best face, because I can't go to another woman and tell her, girl, put your chin up. But man got scratches and scrape marks all on it because I walk around with my head down to the ground, But that's what it is.
That's
and, we're so quick to just bash each other for no reason.
Well, I have to applaud Ariel Ramsey. She's the author.
Yes.
And she brought you women together. And I think we need to see this more, where there are stories about empowering and that people don't get stuck on the negative. It's where you are now.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about where you are now, because when I look at this book in print, you're a nurse now. You were in school. You were continuing to go through school with all this. And for anybody that's being a nurse, these tests, the things that you have to do to become a nurse are grueling, and it takes focus.
Yeah.
How did you focus?
God. It was God. It was that power, and I just feel like it's a little strong something that he done planted inside of me, that when the enemy tries to attack, that thing activates and kicks in full force. And I'm like, because my God is, and I start talking to that thing. But yeah, I was in nursing school. 2016, I graduated the LPN program in 2015. I lost my brother on Father's Day, 2016, and I had plans to go right back to school for my RN degree after I graduated with my LPN, but it just became too much and I needed like a mental break. So I lost my brother that June of 2016, and when he died, something clicked and I'm like, I gotta keep going. So my brother died, then my mother-in-law, she passed away in August of 2016. I re-enrolled back into the nursing program for my RN degree in October of that year. And so it was like a downward spiral, like everything was just like bam, 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 bam. And I'm like, whoa. But it was, it was just whatever, that little bit of strength that got, like my little Goliath. That's what it was, my little Goliath down on the inside of me, just helping me push through. And when I graduated the RN program, they awarded me an award. And I was like, but I don't even know what this is. Like, what does this even mean? And when they had explained what the award represented, it was the triumph that I exhibited while I was going through. And I didn't even really share a lot of what I was going through with my classmates or with my teachers or anything. It would just be like, okay, well, I was late today because I had to take my son to school, But I never missed a day.
Wow.
I was in class, every clinical, and
amazing.
One of my teachers, she saw that. And I still have the email to this day where I had to just break down to her, like, I'm not an irresponsible student, And so she encouraged me, only to see, like, at the end, I was rewarded for the fact that I continued to press through. And the difficult part about it is that their dad, he passed away the weekend after I graduated. I was trying everything to kind of salvage our relationship as parents first. And I had set up an appointment for us to go to a mediator. And that was a terrible idea. And it just blew up in my face. So that was in February, and I hadn't spoke to him or seen him anymore since then. So he would call our son, who has a cell phone, and would let him know, like, I'm picking y'all up today, this, that, and the other. And he would correspond with him. And Jason would just let me know, like, Mom, Dad's coming. And I'm like, okay. So I graduated. And the day that I graduated, I was taking my mom to the ATM. And to back up, too, I'd lost my grandmother a month before their dad passed away. And my mom lived with my grandmother. So that left me to be the sole provider for her. So now I'm taking care of my mom. A month later, I graduate. I see their dad on graduation day. Like, we literally were passing each other in the parking lot. And he ended up coming and getting the boys that Friday and had them that weekend. And then the following weekend was when he passed. And it was hurtful because it was like we never got to say I'm sorry, But then there was a sense of peace that came over me because of his behaviors. And fortunately enough, my best friend is my neighbor. So when I decided that I was leaving, a few rows from her, like literally in the middle. But then the manager called me back and was like, we just had one come open right next door to your best friend. Do you want to live there? And I'm like, well,
amen for the girlfriends.
Yeah. And so I do feel like that too was God's hand of protection over me, because their dad was so sporadic and he would pop up and demand that I come outside. Or, it was in the wintertime, one blizzard. He drove all the way out to my house, seeing the tire tracks going into my garage, which I do own a car. And he's like, whose tire tracks are those? You know, and at that point, you know, told me like, if I ever thought that you were dealing with somebody else, I would hurt you. So it was just like, wow. But I don't know, I guess the fact that I wanted to just prove that I can do this, like nothing is going to hold me back.
Well, you are successful. I think I have, one final question for you, but I think you have achieved everything in your life that you set out to achieve. And I think that speaks about your tenacity, that speaks about your character. And I have to applaud you because there are a lot of women out there that need to hear your story and understand that you can make your own happy ending, that you can control your destiny. What parting words would you give to women out there so that they understand they can do it too?
Yes, life is hard. Nobody ever said that it would be easy, but we have to have the mindset of not giving up and making it no matter what. It's not going to be a straight road, a straight shot. It's not going to always be perfect, and nor will it be handed to you. But at what point do we begin to be the strong black women that we say that we are, and we survive no matter what it is that's thrown our way? Support systems are huge. I understand that. But you get you a few good friends, one or two family members that that you'll have in your corner, and just be determined to make it. And I wanted to be totally different than what I grew up in. I grew up with my mom. She battled with alcohol. My father was a drug addict, alcoholic. I had aunts and uncles on drugs and alcohol that surrounded me. And I saw what it did to them, and I just thank God that I was the one that didn't do it because I saw it, and that I wasn't the one that did it because I saw it.
Amen, Crystal. I want to make sure that everyone sees that she is the ish. 13 powerful women, one of them right here. Crystal, how can people get your book?
Just Cash App me on Facebook. You can get my information. But I'm $ Barclay Nurse on Cash App. But they can find me on Cash App, on Facebook under Crystal Stokes or Crystal Barclay, and just inbox me for the information.
I want to thank Crystal this evening for giving us such a powerful, powerful story. Crystal, I can't say enough, and I want to thank you because I know this was not easy for you to do, and some of the best things in life are the hardest things to do. Before we leave, we want to leave some of you in our audience with a list of resources, because I think as people struggle with depression, domestic violence, and abuse, there are resources. And I would strongly encourage you to reach out to someone. And I'm sure there's someone that's probably watching the program this evening. If you know someone who needs these resources, please reach out and help them. Good evening. Who's that talking? And what are they talking about? Tabernacle Talks, that's what everybody is talking about. And once you watch us, you'll be talking about us too. We stream live every Tuesday evening at 6:30 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube Live, right from the studios of Dayton, Ohio. We have some great shows planned for you in the coming weeks. On September 1st, tune in to hear how Crystal Barkley's journey was not a crystal stair, as described in the poetry of Langston Hughes. But when you're a survivor, you can combat anything that comes your way. On September 8th, tune in to hear from the officers in blue as we discuss the changes in policing and how citizens can hold them accountable. On September 15th, you'll hear American history from the vantage point of America's indigenous people. This will be a great presentation from Guy Jones of the Lakota tribe and a great history lesson for everyone in the family. On September 22nd, we'll have the Clutter Busters on site. professional organizer Lori Fursden showing how to declutter your space and your life. This is a must-see for our hoarders and people who just can't seem to throw things away. Remember, cleanliness is next to godliness. And finally, on September 29th, tune in to hear one couple's story about interracial dating and the challenges they face as America comes to grips with the call for a post-racial society. You definitely don't want to miss this show. Thank you for joining today's program. We hope you found it nourishing for your mind, body, and soul. Please leave comments because we'd love to hear from you and appreciate the encouragement. Hi, I want to make sure that we just let all of our audience know that in this season of voting, it's really important that we get engaged and we mobilize, and we do that now. So I do want to make sure that we make our audience aware of our Tabernacle talk show, The Essentials of Voting. We're going to have Ron McLean on the program, and that's going to be on September 10th. So please make sure you tune in. If you are still wrestling with whether you know how to fill out your registration cards, whether you understand the ins and outs about completing your mail-in ballot, please turn into the show on September the 10th at 6